Hello and welcome to another episode of the CIRS Group podcast. I'm Jacie,
And I'm Barbara.
and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Lacey Venanzi. She spoke at CIRS about the gut microbiome, and we brought her on to talk about the same thing. As always, and I'm like rushing because I'm so excited for you guys to see this interview. But as always, none of this is medical advice. Definitely check in with your practitioner for any changes to the protocol that you want to do. But just a quick intro to Dr. Lacey, and then we'll move straight into the interview. Dr. Lacey is a functional medicine practitioner whose own healing journey inspired her to help others find answers beyond traditional medicine. With over 1,000 hours of training in functional medicine, nutrition, immunology, and more, she specializes in root cause care for chronic illness, hormone and thyroid imbalances, autoimmune conditions, and overall health optimization. She's based in Reno, Nevada, but she works with both local and virtual patients. Big green flags there,
Yeah.
offering holistic, personalized care that blends advanced testing, lifestyle strategies, and novel therapies. So, without further ado, let's jump right in.
Well, thank you again so much, Dr. Lacey Venanzi, for being here with us today. We're very excited to talk about the gut microbiome with you, and especially after watching your talk at CIRS earlier this year, just absolute brilliance out of every sentence that you said.
Oh,
So,
thank
yeah,
you.
and then our recap, our CIRS recap on an earlier podcast, which we can link people to. They want to check that out. We just I just remember the thing that I said was like, it's so rare to see someone who's clearly doing what their calling is. Like
Oh,
you being up there, just like you're just so into it and like, and in such an authentic way. And it's a beautiful thing to witness. And it made something that could be quite dense and or boring to some. You actually make it very entertaining and engaging. So thank you for that work as well.
wow. What a compliment. Also, like, I was slotted as the last speaker of that conference. And,
It's a
like, what a
tragedy.
topic to be the last speaker, because it was like, all right, I got to keep people engaged. I find it incredibly engaging, but it can be dense, as you said. So the fact that it landed in that way, like, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel bad for anyone who had to leave early and miss it. So I hope everyone went back and watched the replay. This is a reminder to do that if you're watching and you haven't. But I guess let's get into the fun aspect of the cross section of CIRS and a messed up gut microbiome. I'd like to first ask, why is it that so many CIRS patients seem to have messed up microbiomes?
Yeah, it's a high percentage, right? I mean, I've been treating CIRS patients now for about 5 years, and prior to that, I had more specialized in like functional medicine, primary care, gastroenterology. So when I started doing CIRS, there was this interesting intersection in it. And I don't have a CIRS patient that doesn't have a gut issue, right? Like it's
Yeah.
pretty much everyone. And there's some bigger concepts around that, and then there's some like really intense nitty-gritty science behind it. But the bigger concept is there's just such massive immune dysregulation that happens in CIRS, but primarily with the innate immune system. And the innate immune system, you're born with it, right? It's sort of this initial line of defense. It's how your body reacts to things coming in, and then how it properly manages and clears that. So when we have the massive cytokine dysregulation that happens in CIRS with MMP9 and TGF beta 1, the innate immune system goes offline. And when that happens, you kind of just become a petri dish for infection. So that can be for the gut, this happens by way of changes in the pH. So you're supposed to be super acidic, you become alkaline. So all these bugs can kind of slowly creep in and start to colonize. You also can't detect infection as well. So things fly under the radar. And you see this in a lot of things. You see this with Lyme, you see this with strep and PANS pandas, you see this with SIBO, right? So EBV, like CIRS patients are so full of infection, and it is secondary to this massive immune confusion that's going on. So that's a big concept in it. There's also things like just persistent inflammation and loss of barrier function or intestinal permeability, secondary to the loss of MSH, right? And then we have this impaired complement system. So the complement system is like a very specific type of immune modulating cell that also helps modulate infection. And I kind of create a picture around it. Like if you picture these little Pac-Men going around like scavenging infection and clearing them, those don't exist when the complement system goes astray. So it's all kind of the same concept, right? It's just like this massive inability to manage infection because of inflammation and immune confusion.
Yeah, that makes sense. And for a CIRS patient at home, I know there's a lot of information out there about their gut and gut tests and GI maps and all kinds of things that people are directed to do to try to help them figure out what is going wrong in the gut. I know you have very specific tests that you like to rely on and recommend to people. Do you want to talk a little bit more about like what
Yeah.
testing can do and what you're looking for when you're choosing a test?
So there's so many different ways that you can investigate and inspect the microbiome, both from like a physical standpoint, so like a colonoscopy, versus a biochemical standpoint. So the hard part with clinical medicine is that a lot of times we're trained in school to do certain things, and then we're trained by mentors to do certain things, but we don't really know like what's actually the gold standard of this, or what is used in research, or what like is Vibrant legit, or is GI map legit? And how do I know if it's legit? Like, we're not trained to be researchers in that sense. So we just assume everyone's running GI maps, let's run a GI map, right?
Right.
So for the biome, if we just look at how do we understand the ecosystem of the microbiome, which is really looking at the colon or the large intestine. So that is where stool testing comes in. So stool testing doesn't tell you much about upper GI. It's really looking at that area. And then its ability, the stool test's ability to truly detect bacteria is where it gets controversial. So culturing methods were and have been used for a very long time. And now kind of the new kid on the block is more genetic testing, which is either called shotgun testing or 16S testing. So culturing is what is still commonly used in clinical practice. It's also commonly used at like a traditional GI, but there's a lot of vulnerabilities because that sample is temperature sensitive. So you poop into the French fry container, you send it to FedEx. If that sample was too hot or too cold, you're going to lose and change bacteria in transit. And then it arrives and it gets put into a petri dish, and that petri dish has a substance called agar. And that agar feeds that bacteria and it grows, and they see what's in that poop sample. But agar grows certain bacteria more and other bacteria less. So it's also a big vulnerability. So
Hmm.
I'll give you an example. Agar loves Klebsiella. It also loves something called disulfovibrio. So you put that bacteria on there and it just blooms right away. But that doesn't mean that that's actually in your gut at that level. It just means it loved agar. So then you report those findings on a GI map or on a Vibrant Gut Zoomer or on a Genova stool test. All of these things are culturing, and it will be an inappropriate representation of what's actually happening in your body because of the temperature dysfunction and because of the agar. So if this is like a hospital setting in a controlled lab and they can manage those things, culturing is great still. We use culturing all the time for things, but not from like a direct to consumer testing, right?
Sure.
So when someone comes to me for a GI map or has a GI map, there is a section on culturing tests called functional markers, which is there blood in your stool? What are your short chain fatty acid levels? Do you have elevated or lowered enzymes, right? These are functions of the biome. These are not sensitive. These will be shown accurately in culturing. So I can look at that, but I literally don't even look at the bacterial breakdown because of how those tests are going to show up inappropriately.
That
So
makes
that's
sense.
my issue with GI map and with culturing. I don't want to like just target GA map, but it seems like that's what people use most
Sure.
often, or probably Vibrant Gut Zoomer would be a secondary one. So I literally can't remember the last time ordered it in my practice. Like I literally never order them. But the type of stool testing I use then is called these genetic sequencing tests. So the two companies in America that are pretty common right now are Nirvana Biome, Tiny Gut Health is kind of on the rise, and then Ombre. So all these use DNA testing. They will be very reliable. I will see very specific details of the ecosystem and then can kind of move on from there. But let's say you're a CIRS patient with IBD, right? Or you've had blood in your stool, or you have a lot of mucus in your stool and like sharp, excruciating pains in your gut. You would be advantaged from a functional marker analysis, which is what comes on culturing, right? So this is where it would be great if they could make a DNA-based stool test with an add-on of those functional markers. So sometimes that's where I'll run more of like a culturing just for functional markers and add that in. But that kind of will give us the biochemistry of what's happening in the large intestine. So then we go to the structure, right? I would never order this. This would be a referral to a GI, but this is where colonoscopies come in. But the other way of determining, are you permeable? Are there structural abnormalities happening here? Would be an intestinal permeability test, which is a urine test. The formal name is a lactulose mannitol test. It's not expensive. It's like 129 bucks. It's just a pain in the butt because you have to drink this nasty sugar solution and then pee for 3 hours into this container. And depending on if that mannitol, which is the sugar that you drink, leaks through your intestine and then into your urine, we can determine how permeable you
Oh,
are.
wow.
So that test has been the gold standard in gastroenterology for like 60 years. It's also in the research world. If you're researching intestinal permeability, your research study would be far less respected if you use, let's say, only zonulin and you didn't use lactulose mannitol testing. So, I mean, to me, that reflects then clinical practice, like we should be using what's valued as
Sure.
statistical data, right? So that's structural aspects. If we creep up into the intestines and then we go into the small intestine, that's where we can detect things like SIBO, which is oh so common in the CIRS community. Stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It's a provocation test. So you would drink again, yet again, a nasty sugar solution, usually two, sometimes three, and then you blow into a device and test for how am I fermenting? Am I drinking that sugar and then my bacteria is blooming and now it's bubbling up into my throat and into that breath device? And that is also something I almost inevitably always do with my patients. So SIBO breath testing, a DNA-based stool test, and intestinal permeability are like no-brainer. All my patients are doing this. And super affordable. Like DNA-based stool testing is like 130 to 200 bucks. Whereas like if you look at the GI map, gut zoomer, all the way up to like $500 doing that, it's like, yikes,
Yeah.
you know? I'm trying to think if there's anything else. There are other tests that you can do for more specific pathogens, like if we're talking about H. pylori or we're talking about parasites or the ever controversial fungal overgrowth. That also is great to use more of a culturing method for that. But I have a company that only tests for those things on culturing. So it's far more affordable, it's more reliable in their lab. And I would only do that if I started to suspect that based on some symptoms. So
Sure.
that's the majority of how I look at the biome and how I think everyone should look at the biome.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is there a point in time during, let's say, a CIRS patient is using the Shoemaker protocol, do you do a lot of these tests at the very beginning to get a baseline and then, retest throughout? Is it okay if someone has gone through the protocol, they still have GI issues, and now they're going to do the testing? Is there like an optimal time for a patient to decide to go forward with this stuff?
Yeah, there's a bit of nuance here. I am of the belief that supporting the biome from moment one is always an advantage, right? Cholestyramine, for the most part, is a pretty benign medication, but it does shift fat metabolism in the biome, which does shift bacteria negatively, right? Not dramatically negatively, but it does. And so knowing kind of what some of your disadvantages are at the beginning and how to support that as you're on a pharmaceutical medication can be really, really helpful. But for me, if someone is struggling with constipation or slow transit time, I will not start them on cholestyramine until they're having a bowel movement daily. That's like a non-negotiable for me because 9 times out of 10, cholestyramine is going to make that worse.
Right.
And then if you're not clearing those biotoxins from your body, they're just going to recirculate. Like cholestyramine only holds on to those toxins for so long before it releases it, and then it just goes right back in. So that for me is like a no-brainer, but it's never too late, right? Like I have so many people coming to me now that have been at CIRS for a year and there's still some issues and they just feel like their gut hasn't ever fully resolved. And like I can totally step in and make changes at that point too. So yeah, in a perfect world, all practitioners would screen and do these things initially because this is the other thing with the CIRS population, there's so much of this sort of mast cell activation syndrome or histamine issues. And there is a lot of nuance with that diagnosis. Like true MCAS, I actually rarely see. So MCAS is like mostly a congenital disorder. You are born with dysregulation in those cells, and you pretty much have to be on pharmaceutical management your whole life. So I rarely see that in a CIRS population. Do I see changes in tryptase, changes in IgE, changes in histamine? Totally. But why is that happening? Right? And in a CIRS population, it's almost always because of the cytokine profile, inappropriate bacteria in the biome that are overproducing histamine or permeability. So if someone comes to me square one CIRS and they're, crazy histamine type symptoms, and I'm not running a stool test and I'm not running an intestinal permeability test, I've just removed two main factors for directly causing those symptoms that I'm not addressing in the patient. And yeah, you could keep them on antihistamines forever. You could put them on cromolyn sodium and have pharmaceutical support, but are you actually getting to the root of why this is happening in a person's body? And I don't like that, right?
Yeah.
I want people to have all the information possible to really understand the nuance of their diagnosis.
Yeah. It makes a ton of sense to me.
Yeah, so we have so many CIRS patients where it's just like they're not getting better. Their MSH stays low, their histamine markers stay low. And I think we have a tendency to kind of normalize our symptoms over time. We're just like, that's just how I poop. That's just
No.
what my poop is like. So would you encourage CIRS patients that, if they might suspect that they have something else going on that's holding them back from fully healing? I know that Lyme is a really, it's a rabbit hole no one wants to have to go down, and it seems like more patients than kind of previously were told they needed to go down that rabbit hole do.
Yeah.
And I know you said the percentage of CIRS patients that have GI issues is quite high.
Yeah.
In your experience, is this just like a good thing to rule out?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like I only see CIRS patients these days that have reached that plateau where it's like so grateful to be where they're at, but it's like I'm still at like 60, 70%, you know? So to talk about that, I use this expression a lot in practice of, there's common and there's normal, right? And when suffering becomes really common, we normalize it because it just makes us feel better about it. So whether that's peeing 3 times at night or having 10 bowel movements a day or being bloated after every single meal or having brain fog after every single meal or not really being hungry till 2 and just waiting till eat till then. Like these things are so common, even in the general population. These things are really, really common, but they're not normal, right? Like they're not what normal physiology is. And when you're our age, right, when you're like 30 to 40, you can get away with that. Like it might be annoying, but it's not going to be causing these like extreme fallout things. But these symptoms are the origins of disease later on. It's the origin of cognitive decline. It's the origin of diabetes. It's the origin of cancer, right? Like it's the origin of so many of these things. So when a CIRS patient comes to me and they're still having those things and they've normalized it, right? We have to keep digging. And those areas in which to keep digging really are more just like good primary care, right? It's like what primary care should be and what I think that the functional medicine tries to do, but I feel like we can even be bigger than that. And Dr. Doinger talks about this a lot. So one of these categories is sleep apnea, right? Like, are you getting adequate oxygen at night and throughout the day, right? Like I could talk to you guys about that for 3 hours, but that would be a huge category because don't you know hypoxia is a huge fallout of having CIRS. So priming that, right? Are your hormones in check and have those been primed? That is a step in the shoemaker protocol that I see so many practitioners glaze over because they're not comfortable with dosing or they're not comfortable with prescribing. And it's like your DHEA and your testosterone have to be like top notch to survive this illness. So that's another one. Then we get into the co-infection land, right? Which you brought up, which co-infections are another entity living inside of your body, feeding off of you, right? Like we just want to put an image to it. There's
Yeah.
no world in which you are going to be able to be a thriving, healthy individual, absorbing nutrients, creating ATP, doing all these things if you have a leech in your body, right? But again, what are those things? These are parasites. These are fungal colonizations. This is SIBO. This is Lyme and other co-infections like Babesia and Bartonella and all these other crazy ones that we're just starting to learn about. So I really do push people that if Shoemaker's stuff has brought you to like 67% and those strategies aren't doing it for you anymore, you got to keep pushing into these categories. Like you got to ask yourself, did my practitioner run DHEA and testosterone? Have I been screened for sleep apnea before? Like, do I breathe well at night? Do I mouth breathe all the time? Right? Am I constantly tired? Have I been screened for infections? Do they know how to run information to know about infection in my body? Because that's also a whole other can of worms. But yeah, it's really important because if the goal is to get MSH to come up, because I too am a big believer in MSH kind of being like the antidote to CIRS, we have to look at what are all of the ways that MSH can have a lid on it, and what are all of the ways that we can start producing MSH again. And we know, like Christian and Dr. Peg have done amazing research around Marcons and that blocking MSH production. So we know that that's like persistent Marcons is an issue. And yes, being still in exposure can create that saga to continue, but I think that we need to kind of keep pushing other treatment modalities for that, right? Like, how can we keep trying to eradicate this? So that's one thing. The other thing that you guys and I have talked about a lot is blue light, right? Like, blue light is a major issue in our society. And if I want to stick to the more diplomatic conversation about this, go to PubMed, type in blue light as a carcinogen. Just type that in, and you will see numerous PubMed results of how blue light is classified as a carcinogen. Okay, so that's like smoking a pack of cigarettes. That's like being on your computer screen all day, right? So there needs to be hygiene around blue light. There needs to be a return to nature, getting in the sun. We're not meant to be in boxes the entire day, right? And there's a lot. Jack Cruz is amazing to follow for this, for tons of different suggestions around this. But I think that it is incredibly important for CIRS patients because if MSH is your master circadian rhythm hormone and you're not in the sun ever, like, how the hell are you supposed to rehabilitate that? Right? Like, there's just no way. But it's not just that, right? It's like, it's all of these different things. Are you still in exposure? Do you have Marcons? Do you have other co-infections? Do you have a blue light issue and you're not managing that? So, again, this is where we get into this nuance and the nitty gritty of like digging into your case more is there are other things that we can still navigate despite moving through the shoemaker protocol and then ending up here, right?
Right.
So that was kind of a long-winded answer, but that
That
gives
was
you.
a great answer. I never real like I knew sunlight's important and getting outside is important, but I notice my dog, Django, will request to go out and sit in the sun multiple times a day. And I live in Las Vegas. It could be
Hot.
115.
So hot.
My Alaskan Malamute wants to go outside and bake for like a solid 10, 15 minutes. And I start to do it with him now. I'm like, he knows what he's doing. He knows what's up.
Yeah, no, animals are naturally drawn to that sun in that way. Animals
Yeah,
just have more melanin in their skin too. So the more melanin you have, you won't get burned as easily, right?
right.
And you can also hold on to light. Like melanin are sun sponges on our skin, which is really poetic. We literally hold light in our skin all the
That's
time.
cool.
Which
Yeah.
the other poetic nature to that is then CIRS is the inability to absorb and create light. Which, is that not like so profoundly what it feels like when you're in the
Yeah.
trenches of it? Like the darkness of what it is. But it's because it is literally dark inside of you, right? Like you have no light inside of you anymore. Because it's not just our skin, right? Like we pull the sun in through melanin and through our eyes, and then we hold it in every cell in our body, right? So there's a really cool, like our gut lining, when you do not an endoscopy, but a colonoscopy, you can have like this condition where it looks like there's polka dots on your skin. And that will happen when you're not tanning the belly and you're not pulling melanin to the surface, it starts to go inward. And as it goes inward, it will make these spots on your intestinal lining. It's like an actual diagnosis that they'll talk about on a colonoscopy, but it basically means that we are not maintaining melanin in our skin. And it's a super high cancer risk if you have that in your intestines.
That's
So
wild.
I could go on and on about the
Yeah.
implications of light in the body, but it takes some bravery because it takes boundaries around convenience, right? Like it is so convenient to work virtually and reach more people. Like it is so convenient to watch shows and learn and be on the computer to put our kids on screens to learn in elementary schools, but at what cost, right? And
Yeah.
so, but we don't, a lot of people just don't even know about this cost because it's not talked about, or it's talked about and then people think you're crazy or fringy. And then
Or
it's,
exaggerating.
or
Yeah.
exaggerating. It's like, go to PubMed, type in blue light as a carcinogen, and then let's talk about it, right? So yeah, it's a really big deal, and I think it's an incredibly important strategy around CIRS recovery.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Thank you for going off on that tangent. That was very helpful.
Yeah.
One thing that came up while you were talking, we talk a lot about what bad, like a bad GI system act. I know I don't know the answer to this. If someone has a good system for
Yeah.
digestion,
Mm,
what does that even look like? Because
I
I
love that.
certainly don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So hunger when you wake up in the morning is a big sign of a healthy GI system. Bowel movements after every meal, which is like crazy. Like so few people do that, but there's a reflex or a reflex that you're born with called a gastrocolic reflex. And it means every time something goes into your stomach, gastro, something exits your colon. So basically you eat and then you poop. So that reflex is functioning in the healthy biome. So we say 1 to 3 bowel movements a day, but the more bowel movements that people are having in a healthy manner, I'm here for it because you're detoxifying, you're getting these things out of your body, your nervous system is working well, no bloating, very little gas. So gas is actually not normal, and neither is bloating because it's a sign of fermentation. Now, if you eat chili that has 5 different kinds of beans in it, you're gonna be tooty, right? Like there is so much fiber in legumes, you're gonna have some fermentation from that, but it shouldn't smell. So flatulence should not smell at all. If it is, you are fermenting something, right? And the more it smells kind of like a rotten egg, dead animal type scent, you are probably having protein putrefaction, meaning there's like rotting flesh inside of you, which is such a disgusting image.
The
That
images you've brought forth during this whole conversation have been really beautiful
I'm
and
a really big imagery person.
yeah, no, I
But
love
yeah,
it. I love it.
not normal to have that smell, right? Not normal to have pain in the intestines. Not normal to like, I'll have some people that will like wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and have a bowel movement. Also not normal. Your bowel movements follow circadian rhythms. So they should be during the day, they should be after meals and timed with that. Brain fog after eating or major fatigue after eating, also not normal. You're either not breaking down that food enough, there was too much sugar in that food, or you're permeable, right? So, yeah, lots of issues around that. Any sort of reaction, really, whether it be rashes, itchiness, like weird discomfort, again, not normal, a sign of dysbiosis happening. So yeah, I mean, food should give you energy. You should be having 2 to 3 bowel movements a day. You should wake up hungry. You should kind of have hunger throughout the day. Like you should have these cyclical moments of having hunger and then being able to be satiated. Also, if you can never be satiated, huge sign of parasites. Huge. So I was talking to my friend about this the other day, who is this homeschool teacher for my son, and they're very comfortable. And there was just this one day, it was about a week after Liam had like a sort of flu. And he gets to her house and he's like, Miss Kayla, I'm super hungry. And she's like, okay, like, you know where the snack area is, like, go for it. And he like ate like a granola bar and an apple and like trail mix. And like, she made him a grilled cheese. And he was like, I'm still so hungry, Miss Kayla. And she just like kept making him food. And she called me and she was like, this kid, like, I've literally fed him like 5 meals at this point. And I was like, he's got a parasite. Like that flu was a parasite. And
Oh,
like,
wow.
sure enough, ran a parasite test on him, which is a whole other conversation of when you can do that. But he had nematodes, he had a couple roundworms, and we worked through that. And his appetites and cravings totally went away, like normal appetite again. So, cravings too, if you're like ravenous for sugar all the time, or like have to have something to be satiated, you are being controlled by a microorganism. That is not you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is wild. Well, that's cool. I mean, it's brings new nuance to the idea of listening to your body because like if there's something in there pulling the puppet strings, then maybe it's not for your situation. And that's why testing is important. That's why working with someone like you is important to like figure all of that stuff out and not just kind of like willy-nilly, try to go down these rabbit holes, which brings me to maybe my most important and final question, which is how does one work with you? Because I know you've got a lot, you've got a wait list, you've got a lot of things going on, but I know a lot of people are interested in digging into this for themselves.
Yeah, so my website's a great place to kind of find me and find some cool information. I've got a great CIRS tab on there. I'm working on some other educational things for people. So my website's super easy. It's just www.drlacey, so drlacey.org. So lots of information there. You'll also see like how to connect with me, my email, my phone number, all that fun stuff. I do intermittently have wait lists when people are working with me. So if you reach out and we can't get you in, I usually can get you in like a 3 to 4 month time period. So still reach out and get on that wait list. And then the other thing I often do for people, if you are on my wait list, I'll have you pre-order some of this testing so that when we do finally meet, like we've got that data and we can kind of hit the ground running with it.
Yeah.
Another great resource, though, one of my mentors, Jason Harleck, who really taught me everything I know about the microbiome. He's based in Australia, so you can't potentially see him if you're an American. But he has a website called the Probiotic Advisor. And it's really nerdy and amazing about probiotics. Like you can type in a condition and then like every strain of probiotic will come up that you could try for that condition. So it's just lovely for information, but he also has some really great either professional training courses or layperson training courses, and he's just a lovely, beautiful person. So a great person to learn from. So, and he's got podcasts, I've got podcasts, so lots of things that way. But I wanted to say one more comment about when we were talking about like what does a good biome look like, right?
Yeah.
So I think another concept that's really important to understand that is a bit different than what a lot of people do for the gut and really for infection. The goal in healing, right, is to identify if there is a pathogen for sure. But as you're moving through that, you have to preserve the host, okay? So let's say you come up with a Lyme infection. Let's say you come up with a parasitic infection or C. diff or SIBO or whatever that is. I am of the belief that if you work on the composition and the health of the healthy microorganisms, that long term, these bad guys can't survive, right? And this is a concept that is missed all the time. Like it's easy to write an antibiotic prescription, it's easy to put someone on oregano or berberine or whatever that might be. But if you are doing that long term, you are harming the host, you're harming the patient, right? So, knowing what that delicate dance is in modulation and infection in the body. So, it's sort of like, okay, we go after him a little bit and then we build up some good. And then we go after a little bit and then we build up some good. Like, this is so important because if you go too aggressive and you kill off these beautiful bacteria in your body, sometimes they never come back, right? And it digs people into a much deeper hole, all in the name of like, I gotta clear this infection. So sometimes I would actually rather people not work on the infection until we really understand how do we preserve this. And so now working with a lot of co-infection patients and CIRS and they're doing their Lyme thing with other practitioners, it's so cool to be like, great, this is your safety net, long game, tried and true, protecting your microorganisms as we bring this into it. And that's what I think needs to be the spirit of CIRS medicine as well, is that we are working on these big things, but we first and foremost are preserving you, right? And that's really a belief in naturopathic medicine. Like that's a mantra of naturopathic medicine and Chinese medicine. But my patients do so much better when I have both of those things at play.
That makes sense.
So when I was first diagnosed, before I found out I had CIRS, I found out I had ankylosing spondylitis. And I joined this Facebook group that was all about ankylosing spondylitis. And they had come to several conclusions. One, that everyone that has ankylosing spondylitis has a Klebsiella overgrowth.
Okay.
Two, that the way that they were going to treat that was to do oil of oregano and never eat starches again. They would literally test everything with iodine for starch. Since then, I have found out about CIRS, and so it's been a really powerful tool to then. I got kicked out of the ankylosing spondylitis Facebook group for telling everyone they had CIRS, but hopefully somebody heard before I left, kind of a thing. So I always really pushed back on their conclusions because the idea that we can have something,
Mhm.
some sort of co-infection that our body is never able to overcome and that we have to be on supports for the rest of our lives is so antithetical to my belief in our body being so resilient. And like most of the time, we just have to give it a support and then get out of our own way.
Yeah.
Which leads me to my question. You've
Mhm.
talked a little bit about, these different co-infections people can have. And what do you think is like, I imagine you have different strategies like dietary, supplemental, etc. What is the typical timeline someone can expect? And is this something they have to supplement for long term? Or is the
Mhm.
goal really to do whatever modalities are needed to get it to a good place and then hopefully they can just stay regulated for the rest of their
Yeah.
lives?
Yeah. That's a great question. And there's a good amount of nuance to that answer. So it kind of depends on how many layers of dysfunction there are in the patient in front of me. It is my belief, the same belief as you, that the body is resilient and the body wants to heal, right? And so my goal, my ultimate goal is to get people off as many supplements and medications as possible. But in that initial phase of like intense dysbiosis, inflammation, whatever that might be, I would say it's about a year. Like it's about a year of support in that sense. Now, The support changes though. Like I'm really big on these phases of treatment, and I kind of move through my phases pretty quickly because I make them really specific. But like the first 4 to 6 weeks are, can we get like a massive drop in inflammation in your gut? And can we get you pooping daily? So motility and inflammation are a big part of that first chapter. And then the next chapter is, okay, we've done that. What is our infectious profile? What does our good bacteria look like? And then we get even more specific in that. So, do we need to address Klebsiella? Do we need to address these things? But what's interesting is I have a lot of patients that don't have a lot of resources or money. And so we have to be really creative about how we go about this, meaning they can be on very few supplements and we have to use food and or fiber because it's super affordable. And it's totally possible. Like, I really think that food in the form of antioxidants, polyphenols, fiber are incredibly modulating for the microbiome. There's also aspects to these things that are inherently antimicrobial, right? So, for example, pomegranate husk or pitaya is like prickly pear on the top of a cactus. Like, these two things are incredibly antimicrobial, but are kind of like food sources. So, to answer your question, I would say if I just had to give like a black and white answer, it's a solid year, right? But I've had these patients now that I've worked with for like 3, 4, 5 years. And after they kind of graduate from me, I'm like, cool. So you want to make sure to maintain a healthy biome. These are the strategies that you're going to follow, right? And they kind of are tried and true religious about that. And then every year we rerun a stool test. And every single year it gets like more diverse, more beautiful, more, speciation or like little guys starting to grow to fill in the biome. So it's just, that's the beauty of it, is it's the long game is ever evolving if you've adopted this love and care for that ecosystem. But it's not like I gotta take 10 pills every morning and every night. It's like, what are the different colors of food that you're eating? Are you getting 45 grams of fiber every day? Do you have berries in your diet? Are you getting adequate protein, but not too much saturated fat, right? Like there's all of these little purse strings that you pull for a healthy biome. What are your butyrate levels? Do you have butyrate producers above 40%? Because if you do, kind of impossible to have infection in your biome. So my goal is to get people to that point, educate them so deeply in how to take care of their biome, and then it's just living. Then it's just cultivate these habits, eat these beautiful foods. I'm more about, can we add in more beauty and more diversity rather than you can't do that, right? And the things that are, treasured and delicious and naughty, like we follow the 80/20 rule. 80% of the time you're taking care of your biome and 20% of the time you're eating in and out, or you're getting your slice of pizza, or you're doing what you want to do, and you have so much resilience that it's cool. Like it's not going to cause crazy problems for you.
I like that answer so much better than you have to take oil of oregano for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
No, so oil of oregano, like, so first off, any essential oil, like,
She's like, don't get me started.
I
Go
don't
ahead,
know if
sorry.
y'all have opened a bottle of oil of oregano and put that on your skin. That shit is hot. Like, that will legit burn a hole through your skin if you leave it there. So now imagine you're taking a capsule full of that, and that is opening on a delicate internal organ lining, right? It's gnarly. Like it can cause ulcers. It can like mass extinct different types of bacteria. Berberine, I'm so against berberine. Okay. Like it's touted as this like basically a GLP-1. And it's like, no, it's an antimicrobial that's like mass executing tons of your bacteria. It also hypergrows E. coli in your body by 400% when you're taking it. Like, it should not be taken in an essential oil form unless you have some crazy infection that would require antibiotics. And then, cool, let's use the botanical version of that, like golden seal, like oregano, like berberine. But otherwise, I have people that have been on berberine for like 10 years. And I'm like, no, like look at their biomes. And I'm like, oh no. So this happens all the time. Now, not the same if you get it in a tincture. If you get it in a tincture form, so like oregano or even berberine or golden seal, it is kind of like a very mildly suspended version of that medicine in an alcohol base, right? And so it's not going to burn the you know what out of your intestinal lining. It gently shifts things. It's selective. It's going to go after the bad guys and not go after the good guys. So again, I rarely prescribe essential oils in my practice because of that.
Amazing. I loved that tangent. I'm so glad I
Yes,
brought it up.
I know, me too.
But you
Barbara,
guys, for your HLA B27 stuff with the ankylosing spondylitis, like there's
I
a
feel
there's a
seen.
there's a good short tangent here, and that is if you are a patient with an HLA disorder, okay? So ankylosing spondylitis, celiac disease, Hashimoto's, RA, you have to have CIRS on your DDX list, right? You have to examine your HLA profile, right? Because inevitably, those things are kind of the domino effect of the HLA genetics of CIRS, right? I really don't think I have anyone that comes to my office with those conditions and not have CIRS, right? So yeah, but it's because of the genetic overlap with those disorders. Yeah.
Now I want to talk to you about the Black Plague and the studies that they did that found that those HLAs were protective against the Black Plague, and that's now why we have SIRS, but we really should end at
I
some
have a
point.
feeling we could go many
Yes.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my one last sentiment, especially for the CIRS community, right? Because there's this belief that like, oh, you've CIRS, oh, you've low MSH, like you're permeable, right? Like just accept it. You're permeable, right? I hear this from so many practitioners. I hear this from so many patients. And although there is a high likelihood, right? Like MSH can impact that. It's like 60% of my CIRS patients and some CIRS patients that have had, MSH less than 8 for a decade, histamine symptoms up the wazoo, and I'm like, this person's going to be permeable to the gills. And it comes back and they're not permeable, right? Which is a huge advantage in recovery, right? So don't assume, test for it. It's $129 through Rupa, meaning you as a patient can go and order that directly and do that, right? It's a very easy test to read. You're either in the green or you're in the red, right? And knowing that can empower you of what is the next appropriate thing to work through to start to rehabilitate my immune system. So that's just been something that's been on my heart lately because I've just seen it so much and it's not the case all the time.
No, that's great. A great point. And we'll, whatever tests were mentioned that I can find, I'll link in the description for anyone. I know I'll be taking all of them, so it'll be a good
Yeah.
time to check those out. As a patient, you can do those tests. You can take them to your doctor, see if they have any feedback for you. If not, obviously reach out to Dr. Lacey and get on her list and work with her in the future as well. So, thank you again so much for
You're
being
welcome.
here.
You're
Such
welcome.
so much great info. I learn every time I hear you speak, so I'm just very grateful for you. And for everyone else, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you over at the cirsgroup.com.
We'll see you there.
Bye.